Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our monthly webinar series. My name is Maya Dimishkovich, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Carroll Community College, and I will be your moderator today. Before we get started, and I know we have a very exciting topic and very relevant topic, I have a few housekeeping items. So the first one is this session is going to be recorded, so if you registered and for some reason were not able to attend or you want to watch this webinar later, we will send you the recording after this event. The second one is feel free to submit questions as we go through this presentation. We will leave some time at the end of the presentation to address all of your questions. Also, we would love to know who is joining us today. So if you don't mind, take a minute to let us know your name, maybe the organization and your role at your organization. So John can potentially tailor some of his presentation to your roles. And at the end, make sure to stay till the end because we have a worksheet that we will share with you. And it's a handout you can use to go back to your organization and to start working with your team. Okay. So now it's my pleasure to introduce John Zeigenfuse, and he is the Senior Director of Business Solutions, where he leads a team of industry experts and works with organizations to develop tailored employee training, build practical systems, and facilitate workshops and retreats to keep your teams engaged. His approach is grounded in real-world experience and designed for the day-to-day realities businesses face today. Okay, please join me in welcoming John Zeigenfuse.
Well, hello everyone. So thank you for that lovely introduction. And between Maya and myself, if you guys can pronounce both of our last names, there is a special reward for you guys at the end of the, no, I'm kidding. Yeah, welcome. And yeah, just kind of the subtitles you see here on the first slide. First slide, is great strategy wins on paper and great execution wins in reality. So before we begin, just a little bit of a poll question that you could feel free to put in the chat or not. But what is one of the biggest obstacles you face right now in moving your organization forward? So just think about that. And I'm hoping as we get through this training a little bit with this webinar, is there might be a few aha moments, and there might be just a few things you're like, I think I can take and use this to help overcome this obstacle that we might be facing as an organization right now. So with that being said, you'll see this picture up here on the first slide. There's a documented book and there's a documentary as well about the race to the South Pole. In kind of the golden age of explorers, there was very little left for people to discover to be the first to do. And so there was this little competition between two people. The guy on the left in your picture, his name was Robert Scott. He was an admiral in the British Navy, the British Armada, and he wanted to take a group of people to be the first to get to the South Pole. The person on the left is a guy named Roald Amundsen. He was a Norwegian, and he's kind of been credited or taglined the last of the Vikings. And so these two nations were having a competition to get to be the first to put their flag of their country in the actual South Pole. It's a really intriguing book, but what the author does here is they look at both of these as case studies to talk about maybe what to do in some businesses and what not to do in businesses. And there were some very key leadership takeaways from this book. One is about self-discipline. There was one on accountability that emphasized the needs for self-respect and holding yourself to a very high standard. On problem solving, that obstacles are not ever insurmountable problems, but we should look at them as opportunities to look for solutions yet to be found by preparing well, taking on risk and choice, looking at things that might be out of your control, and on independence. that discipline has to be self-imposed. So that's kind of it. And some of this comes from these two gentlemen, and why was one able to be successful and overcome those obstacles and be accountable and take the necessary risks, and the other one kind of going through a similar situation kind of fell flat. So you see the quote there. It says, "Victory awaits him who has everything in order," luck, people call it. "And defeat is certain for him who has neglected to take the necessary precautions in time." And this is called bad luck. We use those words all the time. But what Roald Elmonson's saying is that we create our own luck by the preparation, the diligence, the ability to solve problems, the ability to overcome obstacles to meet those things. So that's kind of where this, just a nice little story to start our conversation going. So in the chat, I think some of you said there's too many priorities in the poll, lack of accountability, not tracking the right things. And so really, 2/3 of you said that there's too many priorities is one of the biggest obstacles. That's actually one of the things we're going to address in this. So the purpose of this session, as far as objectives and outcomes, is we want to help leaders, whether you're middle management, C-suite, part of the leadership team, all right, to number one, diagnose why some strategic plans stall during their implementation. There's no shortage of great ideas, but as far as making them happen. Objective number two, or learning outcome number two, is we want to identify and define what we're going to call the wildly important goal, or the WIG for short. Okay, so identify what our wildly important goal is. Also distinguish between lag measures and lead measures as far as trying to create a compelling scoreboard to look at, and then just apply simple execution practices that will improve follow-through. So the question we need to think about, as you kind of helped out in the poll, is why do plans stall or fail? And the research shows there's really been 5 common barriers to that. One is what most of you voted for in the poll, is there's just too many priorities competing for our attention that we don't have the time to give focused time to the things that are really going to move our organization forward. One of the sayings here is too many priorities is if everything is important, nothing is important. And I'll tell you this, if you have more than 3 priorities, you don't really have priorities, you just have a list. So look at your list and see what are the 2 or 3 things that really need my attention, that I as a leader, manager, need to give my time and attention to. Second one is focusing on lag measures. A lot of times we do this because that's kind of they dominate our thinking. That's some of our goals. Many organizations measure the results after the fact. We look at revenue, profit, customer satisfaction, maybe even retention. I mean, lag measures are very important, but they're always reactive. They're never proactive. And we'll focus on that a little bit more. And then the daily whirlwind. This is what some of you talked about, just too many interruptions. So as far as the daily whirlwind, that our day-to-day operations consume our attention. We get emails, meetings, customer issues, administrative work. We come in with a great plan for the day, and then we get kind of sucked into this daily whirlwind, and the whirlwind always wins unless you have a strategy to protect your time. All right, lack of visibility. Many teams can't answer these 3 questions. What is our goal? Are we winning? And what should we do this week? They come in and let their week dictate what they do, is very responsive, when they're going with a plan and being proactive and making their week work for them. The last one here is week accountability. So many organizations hold annual planning meetings but lack weekly execution rhythms. Strategy just becomes aspirational and not behavioral. So I want to, as part of this, I kind of want to put this little grid up here. This is the standard S-curve, the business S-curve. You kind of start an organization, you grow the organization, then you become kind of big, maybe even cumbersome. But what we're going to do is kind of reorient this. Is that I know most of your organizations, and I know a lot of you on this call, you're not short on talent. You've got great people that you work with. You're not even short on ideas. We all have these creative minds and looking for shortcuts or systems or developing these things. We're not even short on strategy. right? We have a lot of meetings. But what a lot of organizations are short on is the execution because of those 5 common barriers. So research really does show that the majority of strategic initiatives fail during implementation, not because the strategy was wrong, but because the execution system was weak. So if we look at this little S curve here, is we got our great people. That's what starts it. You guys have very talented people in teams, or they wouldn't be working for you. But the people kind of get you so far, all right? And then you get your people together, and then you develop the strategy. And from that strategy, your people have their creative ideas, putting their minds to use, writing all these things down, whether it's a strategic plan, a 3, 5, or 10-year plan, and you get those things in place. And then next is the execution. And if you have those 3 things, the right people, the right thoughts, the right strategy, and great execution, you're going to get optimal results. But you'll see on this curve here is that the steepest part of the curve with the steepest slope is in the 3rd leg of that, the execution, when that really drives up. Because if you don't have good execution, you still have the same people, you still have the same strategy, but you flatten the curve. And execution is what helps that curve become optimal so that you get the best results. So we have to give careful time and attention to execution to make sure that we get the results that we want. So to help with this conversation, I took a lot of material. I'm not the originator of this, from a book called 4 Disciplines of Execution. They call it 4DX by short. Couple of great quotes as part of this. There's always going to be more good ideas than you and your teams have the capacity to execute. It really takes in the notion that we have limited bandwidth. 40 hours a week, the average American works 53 hours a week, so you look that in there. You cannot do everything and understand that. You have to create some priorities. And this book really goes ahead and says, hey, 2 to 3. Anything more than that is just a list, and if everything's important, then nothing is. And then you have to decide what your highest priorities are and have the courage to say no to other things. That goes back to the book I introduced, The Race to the South Pole. Is the reason one of them was successful is because on the good days when they could have traveled further, they stopped. He set goals in mind and was able to say no. The other one on good days would travel as far as they could until people were exhausted. And that actually had a snowball effect on how much food they have to eat, how many calories they need, how much sleep they needed to recover. That actually ended up blowing up their plan because they said yes when opportunities presented itself rather than saying no. And right here in the middle, it says, if your team's operating exclusively in this whirlwind, where they're giving everything they have just to sustain their day-to-day operations and survive, they're not playing to win. They're playing not to lose. So we can talk about this more, but I love my Baltimore Ravens, and I don't know if you know this, they blew, I think it was, they had 9 losses this past season. 2 of them were epic collapses because they went into a prevent defense and played not to lose rather than playing to win, where they had a 90% probability to win and they lost it. And maybe some of you are nodding or giving you guys PSD from talking about the Ravens. But the good news in all of this is that this book has developed a system designed specifically to help us solve these problems, overcome, reduce, and eliminate these barriers to our success. So if you ever attempt to spread your limited capacity across multiple goals, is the most common cause for failure, as we saw in our poll. So here is a good quote. It's from Jack Welch, the ex-CEO of GE that ended up buying NBC and a lot of Rockefeller Center and all that stuff. But he says, your goals cannot be noble and vague at the same time. Targets, your goals cannot be so blurry that they can't be hit. And he says, your direction as an organization has to be so vivid, so clear, that if you randomly woke up one of your employees in the middle of the night, one of your staff in the middle of the night, and you asked him or her, where are we going? They could still answer it in a half-sleep stupor. That's how clear and how ingrained your strategic goal should be, or what we will call your wildly important goal, that they live and breathe it. So this book actually has these 4 disciplines, they call 4 disciplines of execution. The first one being the discipline of focus, then the discipline of leverage, of engagement, and of accountability. And it kind of creates this little diagram here that's a wonderful diagram. It looks like this, kind of this pyramid or this triangle. That number one, the discipline of focus, also is reported as focusing on your wildly important goal. So execution improves dramatically when a team decides what matters most and is able to give it focused attention. And you'll see how that bridges across discipline 2, 3, and 4. And there's a little formula that says from X to Y. When we talk about that a little bit more detail, you'll see that. Okay? So focus on your wildly important goals. Know what they are, that if you ask anybody when they're half asleep, they would be able to recite it like that. Number 2, the discipline of leverage, is talking about acting on lead measures. That the measures are essentially the system of behaviors that produce the result. You see, we all understand the lag measures, but lag measures actually are at the end and reactive. Lead measures are proactive. They're kind of what guides it. The daily actions you take are going to determine whether or not your goal is achieved. What are you doing every day to help meet that? That's the lead measure. That's something that's in your control. So the discipline of engagement, using compelling scoreboard, is you have to understand that people play differently when they're keeping score. That's actually a quote from Sean Covey. All right, but when teams can clearly see progress, engagement and ownership naturally increase. How are you communicating how you're doing and winning? Does it come at the end of the quarter? Does it come in some spreadsheet that kind of measures success? And I'll tell you this, with the compelling scoreboard, discipline 3 and discipline 2, the discipline of leverage, acting on lead measures, you never fatten a calf by weighing it. So you've got to stop looking at analytics as something to say, how did we do? But we've got to look at analytics to say, what are we doing? And the last one, the discipline of accountability, is create a cadence of accountability in your organizations. That regular accountability conversations help the team stay focused on the commitments and maintain momentum. So the 4 disciplines of execution. Execution is simply knowing where you're going, doing the things that move you forward, watching the dashboard, and checking in along the way. That's it, 4 disciplines. It's a really simple method and maybe sounds oversimplistic to you, but you don't need to complicate it. If you can have focus, leverage, engagement, accountability, you're going to actually make the needle move in your organization in ways you never expected. So let's dive into a little bit deeper. So first up, the discipline of focus. You can see it's kind of these 2 things, these 2 competing visions here. There's the urgent, which is called the whirlwind, the day-to-day jobs, and the important, the goals, marked by a bullseye and an arrow hitting it. These are the new activities that are going to drive you. The idea of the whirlwind, if you've ever seen, I don't know, Twister or Wizard of Oz, you can see how the whirlwind or the tornado comes and it sucks in things. You can go into your job that day and say, this is what I want to do. And then you hear a conversation. Somebody comes into your office and says, I need help with this. And you get sucked in, you get pulled away from your target goals that you're going to try to accomplish that day. So in the last webinar, if you're a part of that, we discussed this acronym called VUCA, which is, again, an acronym that stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And it really, that acronym talks about how disruption is the new constant. Whether it's changing regulations from the government, whether it's workforce shifts, whether it's cultural things, new technology, or an evolving customer expectations. Every organization today is influenced by forces beyond their control. But what if you could see what's coming before everyone else does and possibly plan for it? So the idea is if we can narrow our focus to 1 or 2 goals, focus on the outcome, not the process, identify the biggest impact. Those things can actually project things a little bit more than just react. I think we're all familiar with what I'm going to show you in the next slide, the Eisenhower time matrix. If you're not, there's some good reading on it. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is great. But in the Eisenhower time matrix, it has these 4 quadrants. And the things that are competing for your time, your bandwidth, are the things in the whirlwind that require your attention, and the things that are focused and target your WIGs that really need your attention. And on the vertical axis here in the Eisenhower time matrix, you can see you have the not important and the important, not important on the lower half, important on the upper half. And then on the horizontal axis, you have these things that are urgent and not urgent. Now, I used to live my life by this matrix. And I added to it from Stephen Covey's Habits of Highly Effective People when I first read about it. Because I thought, when I stay in the important and urgent category, what things am I experiencing? If I could put adjectives to it. And some of the adjectives, and maybe they resonate with some of you, the important and the urgent, these are the things I feel. I feel when I come into the office and I got to deal with these things in this quadrant, I feel stressed, I feel very reactive, and I feel very pressured. But when I have time and I can spend it in the important and the not urgent, the things that I feel or experience, I feel strategic, I feel rewarded, and I feel very reflective that I've had time to look and evaluate. And then on this third quadrant right here, the urgent and not important, when I spend time in here, I feel like they're typically interruptive, busyness, or administrative. And then last but not least, the not urgent, not important, trivial, low value, and wasteful. And what I did, and well, this is partly with Stephen Covey, all right, it's what is my reaction to do these things? What do I need to do? This is what I'm experiencing. So I need to respond to things in this quadrant. I need to build in focus time for things in this quadrant. I need to try to delegate things in this quadrant. And then I need to manage and reduce things in this quadrant. Because if I spend too much time in any one of these quadrants, I actually have a very inefficient work week, right? If I spend too much time in important and urgent, what I experience on the tail end of that is I feel burnout, exhaustion, and I make short-sighted decisions. If I spend too much time in this quadrant without giving careful attention to the other ones, I can spend time over-analyzing, get caught up in this dilemma of perfectionism, the analysis by paralysis, and become very indecisive. If I spend too much time in this quadrant, I can feel frustrated, a loss of leadership focus, busyness without any progress. And last but not least, again, complacency, disengagement, and procrastination. So the goal here is to manage your time well. You're the keeper of your time. How much time are you given to the important, not urgent? So if all things are the same and you statistically spread your time across this where you give 25% to each one, all right, 75% of your time, okay, is in the is the things that would need your focus. 75% in the other three categories. So you actually have to build a moat or insulate yourself that you give yourself adequate time to step into that top right box, that top right quadrant. So that is going to be where you put your wig and your time given to your wig. So here's your wig, your wildly important goal. And it can be a number of things. It could be a financial goal, a quality goal, a strategic goal. It could be a safety goal. It could be with anything. But if your goal is a financial goal, or maybe it's new customers, for us at the college, it probably is enrollment. How do we get more students enrolled? All right, that's going to be our wildly important goal. What is yours? All right, so you can see a financial goal. You want to be prospective revenue, profitability, investment performances, cash flow, and/or cost savings. Quality goal, efficiency, cycle time to productivity, customer satisfaction. Strategic goal, service to the mission. When you develop your wig, there's a format for it. And I said this when we looked at that pyramid from X to Y. So formatting your wig, a great example would be, and it's simple, you don't have to overcomplicate it. Increase customer satisfaction from 85% to 95% by December 31st. So it is April, so in the next, 8 months, 7 months, 7.5, whatever it is that we have this time to increase our customer satisfaction. That's it. For us at the college, it might be we want to increase our enrollment by 2,000 students by January 1st, 2027. And there's your wig. Everybody knows it. You could wake them up in a half-sleep stupor and they should be able to know that. What is it for you? Think about that. So a quick poll question I want to ask you is, do you have a wig that your team is aiming for? Do you have a wig? So think about that. And it's just yes or no, 50-50, all right? Yeah, and we'll see how he goes. The poll comes up. So we only had 2 response, so it's 50-50. All right, so thank you guys. So keep looking at that poll off to the side. Do you have a wig that your team is aiming for? So that's developing your wig. The next one, discipline of focus. The next one is the discipline of leverage. So, man, there's a lot here. But typically, and I even see it here at the college that I get to be a part of, we focus a lot on metrics, but most of our metrics are reactive. I don't know what it is for you. And I've lived a lot of my life that way. So you can see there the areas of health. The areas are personal health, developing new clients, getting student enrollment. So that's our wildly important goal, right? But if we look at it by the lag measure for personal health, I want to drop 15 pounds. Right, by a certain time. And I could actually get on the scale at the end of each week and see, did I achieve my goal? Am I moving the needle in the right direction? But that is a lag measure. And if you remember saying you don't fatten a calf by weighing it, you fatten a calf by feeding it. Weighing it is the lag measure, feeding it is the lead measure. So a lead measure for me in my personal health would be to make sure I walk, make sure I go to the gym, make sure I consume the right calories. If I'm able to do those 3 things that are in my control, then getting on the scale at the end of the week, outside of my control, the numbers, you're going to see it moving in the right direction. So focus on the lead measures are mission critical for achieving your goal. Lead measures should be predictable. If they move, the goal should move. And they influence it because the team has control over it. So again, you can kind of see some of the examples there. I don't know if we need to go too much more detail because I think you get it, okay? And in this discipline of leverage, if I put another grid up here, all right, and talk about time versus impact, all right, we look at this like this. So this is a triangle. In the math world, the triangle means delta, which means change. So if you look at this and I bisect this triangle here, or maybe put it into 3 categories, is the amount of time I put to change that has the least amount of impact is when I react to change, okay? Less time is put towards preparing for change, and at the very top of the pyramid that has the greatest impact, the highest up on that vertical axis, is creating change. The way to create change is to focus on your lead measures. The way to react to change is focus on your lag measures. So here's a great quote by Abdul Kalam. It says, "You cannot change your future, but you can change your habits, and surely your habits will change your future." So I view it like this. The lead measures, okay, the leverage that you create is like a lever, right? You have an incredible goal, which is the load. Your lead measures are the effort arm. And where you move that fulcrum kind of depends, and that's developing your lead measures. Archimedes said, if you give me a lever, I'll move the world. So this is the discipline of engagement, or discipline of leverage. Up third, okay, and I need to respect your guys' time, and we're doing okay, is the discipline of engagement. What this means is you want to keep a compelling scorecard. See, people behave differently when they know the score, and a compelling scoreboard answers one question: are we winning? I talked about the Ravens. I look at the scoreboard, I look at the clock, I'm like, how much time's left? Can we eke out a win? How much time do we have left? But a compelling scoreboard just answers the question, are we winning? And a good scoreboard does not overwhelm people with data. I know we are a data-driven society and culture, all right? And we have all kinds of metrics and spreadsheets and dashboards, but it doesn't overwhelm them, okay? If someone looks at the scoreboard and needs a spreadsheet explanation, it's not a scoreboard, it's a report. A true execution scoreboard is instantly understandable just by looking at it. And as I said, people behave differently when they know the score. One of the simplest truths about human behavior. People perform differently when the score is visible. All right? A moment the score is kept, effort increases, focus sharpens, and people naturally start adjusting their behavior and their performances to help the team win. In organizations, when progress toward a goal is invisible, engagement actually drops. And when people can see progress, they naturally lean in. So scorecard, compelling scoreboard answers this one question: are we winning? If someone can look at the scoreboard, okay, they should know right away. One of the other things I think a scoreboard does, it creates ownership. Okay, when teams see the score, something powerful happens. It stops being management's priority and starts becoming the team's challenge. If the scoreboard is only seen by the C-suite, the executive team, the upper management, then you're never going to influence the behavior of the people that actually can move the numbers and change it. Imagine if you're the Ravens and the only person that knew the score was John Hartwell. He's with the Giants now, our new manager, our new head coach. All right, the players need to know it. They need to know how much time. That's why it's displayed. A compelling scoreboard creates a sense of urgency. And the 3 rules here, okay, it should be easy for everyone to see. It doesn't live in a report that only leadership reviews. Okay, the best scoreboards are visually easy. All right, an important goal when the lead measures are driving it. Your wildly important goal and the lead measures when you see it. So people can't see the score, they can't start playing the game. So poll question number 2, and you can put this in there. Thank you for those of you that responded to the last one, is does your organization currently have a compelling scorecard and scoreboard that people can see and adjust their behavior to? So as you answer that question, all right, I'll wrap up with the last discipline, the discipline of accountability. And that should actually be a number 4 there, so I'm sorry about that. The discipline of accountability, that your execution improves when teams create a weekly rhythm that's inspirational, motivational, and volitional. And a short weekly WIG meeting should look at these 4 things: last week's commitments, review the scoreboard, make new commitments, and make it fun and engaging. So you only need 15 minutes a week to do this, but it gets you a little bit out of the whirlwind, focus on the right things. And these short weekly rhythms will maintain momentum. So without discipline, execution dies. And it only needs to be 15 minutes a week, will dramatically improve your execution. So I want to do a quick recap of the 4, that's it. Okay, the discipline of focus, the discipline of leverage, the discipline of engagement, the discipline of accountability. And we talked about the discipline of focus is having a WIG, all right, 1 or 2. The discipline of leverage is look at what your lead measures are going to be that are going to move your organization forward. What are you going to do this week that helps you achieve the wildly important goal? You can't predict the future, but you certainly can help create the future by the behaviors you take. All right. 3rd one, keep a compelling scoreboard. All right. It tells you at a glance whether you're hitting the target or not. And it's very inspirational and motivational. Okay. So that's the discipline of engagement, and the discipline of accountability is hold regular sessions to review the scoreboard and discuss progress. So these practices are simple, but applied consistently, they can transform the way teams execute strategy. So I'll end with this picture of the race to the South Pole. Here is the first quote is, great strategy wins on paper, but great execution wins in reality. And vision without execution is a hallucination. So as they raced to the South Pole, and Raoul Ardmanson got there first, and I don't know that Robert Scott knew what happened, but when he eventually got to the South Pole, he saw the Norwegian flag planted. And he wrote in his journal, he says, great God, this is an awful place, and terrible for us to have labored to it without the reward of priority. Meaning all the work that I did, and somebody beat me to it. But the story goes on a little bit, is Robert Scott actually never made it back to England because of some of his poor decisions. He and his team ended up passing away in Antarctica on the way home from not meeting their goal. So great lessons to learn from Old Edmondson about being strategic, being focused, having the right leverage, keeping people accountable. And I hope this is good for you. And again, that book is 4 Disciplines of Execution. It's actually, it's a pretty thick book, but the process is very simple. And I just hope that as we try to make our organizations forward, that we can adopt some of those principles and have focus, have leverage, all right, have accountability. Which one am I missing? Engagement, and have engagement. Get the team on board. So with that, I have a question, okay? Maybe for you to reflect on, and you can put it in the chat if you want. What is one thing that you heard today that you think you could implement next week or in April, the next 2 weeks, whether you could implement it pretty quickly? So I'll give you time to kind of put those things in the chat. And I know some of you have been sending Maya a few questions that if you have any more, please put them in the chat, or Maya can read some of those as well that people have submitted.
Thanks, John. Yeah, please add your questions below if you have any. But my question, John, is, so people listen to your presentation and the 4 disciplines, and if somebody wants to start applying it tomorrow, what do you suggest their first step should be?
Well, the first discipline is develop your wig. But that brings a lot of other questions. How do you figure out what's your biggest priority, right? What should be our wig? And I think you might have to I would say the first thing you probably have to do is get a few people together, talk to them about these disciplines. Is this something you want to adopt in your team? And if they say yes, if they're going through it, is learn how to develop your wig. You could get the book and read through it, but a simple way to do it is to do a couple of analysis. I would do a SWOT analysis, and maybe you have it. All right, and when you do your SWOT analysis, make sure you kind of force rank those things. Make sure you kind of see the leverage of how do you use the strength that you have to mitigate against any threats and to actually optimize the opportunities that are there as far as the SWOT analysis. And then looking at your weaknesses, what weaknesses you have to develop that open you up for being vulnerable to threats, and what weaknesses do you have that make it hard to maximize the opportunities that are presented. So do a SWOT analysis first. You can also do a pestle analysis. You can also do what's called a start, stop, continue, or a innovate, elevate, and eliminate kind of a analysis to help figure out what things are we doing that we should not be doing, what things are we doing that if we elevated it would really go well, and where are we lacking some innovation? If we created a new system, a new thing, a new product that would actually really move us forward, you know, a new recruiting tool. So look at those 3 analyses, and then from that, like I said, force rank it, take a poll, and figure out what are going to be your 1 or 2 wigs coming out of those analyses that you did. So step number 1 is you can't do anything without a wig, a wildly important goal. Thanks, Maya.
Sure. I know you have a handout to share, but before we share it and you tell people how to use it, do you want to talk about your upcoming book discussion in 2 weeks?
Oh, sure. Yeah, so we're doing this as a resource to the community. We are Carroll Community College, and I know time is of the essence for many of you as senior leaders in your organizations. So we want to help spur that on. And so one of the best books I've read recently was called The Leadership Challenge. And so we're going to talk about that. And the Leadership Challenge just talks about 6 practices of good leaders and 30 behaviors. It's going to be a lot. We'll just focus mostly on the 6 practices and what that looks like. So the Leadership Challenge, some of you have read that book probably before in your leadership journey, but it's always good to have a refresher. And we consume the content and kind of prepare a Reader's Digest version or a Cliff Notes version of it for you so that it can be inspiring and you can walk away with something practical without investing so much time into it. So that'll be April 30th at 11 o'clock. Please join us.
Yep. And you don't have to read the book, right? We'll talk about it. If you've read it, come with your questions or maybe your experience. It's very informal conversation discussion. And I added a link in chat so you can register. And I'm going to put another link, which is for the handout.
Can you show that, Maya, and I can kind of walk through it? So we've kind of put this together. First step, identify your most wildly important goal. And there's a couple different things, like I said, inventories you can take to try to determine that with your leadership team. And then as you do that, then the next step is identify your lead measures. and then identify the whirlwind, all right, the things that are kind of keeping you from doing that. What are the weekly actions you're going to take, your accountability, and your final reflection questions. So you can kind of see it's right there. It's a great tool. I think steps 1 and 2 will really start getting you going and talking about it. And then you have to figure out a way to create that leverage, that score, that not the leverage, the engagement piece. How do you create the scoreboard so that your people know what they are? But this kind of just starts it, like I said, it's just a template to use. And it's fun. And if anybody needs any help or follow-up with this, we are available. All my contact information is in the slide, and I think Maya will put that in there. But I'll put the slide back up, and you'll see that there's our contact information. If anybody has any questions, concerns, or wants some follow-up, we'd be happy to help you with that. So Carroll Community College, we're here for the community, all of you business leaders out there. So with that, I think our time is gone. We're just 2 minutes ahead of schedule.
That's great. If you guys have any additional questions, feel free to email John after this webinar. I know he's very responsive and he'll get back to you. I hope you do register for our next book discussion in 2 weeks. And we look forward to seeing you again in a month for this webinar series. Yes, thank you, everyone. Thank you, John.
Thank you all. All right. Hopefully we'll see you in a couple weeks. Bye now.